Welcome to day 3 of class, where we will discuss the acidity levels of different types of foods and what the proper processing procedure is. I will say this as a disclaimer, I will always teach you the correct way, and you do your own research, and then you can go from there and decide what methods you want to use, because some people pressure can their vegetables, some people hot water bath their vegetables for the 3 hours to get that safe result. Again, I will always teach the proper method, and you do your own research and you decide what you would like to do for your household. So, the first slide that you see is low acidic food examples: peas, sweet potatoes, carrots, corn, meat, and fish are considered low acids. Foods that can be properly processed in a boiling water canner as opposed to pressure canner are separated by a pH value of 4.6. Pressure canning is necessary for foods that have a higher pH than 4.6. We can call a food an acid item if it is made up in almost entirely or mostly of a substance of a pH of 4.6 or below. Vegetables and seafood are more likely to have that C. botulinum spores than meat. Again, they've done research on it, and meat had pretty much 0% botulinum spores. I'll say 0.3%. It's very, very low, almost non existent on the botulinum spores. So it's a very rare occurrence for meat to have those botulinum spores that will create that environment for the botulism toxin, even though it has a lower pH. The reason they suggest that you peel your sweet potatoes before you can them, or you peel your potatoes or carrots or any root vegetables, is because those botulinum spores can be on those vegetables. Um, but it's only on the skin of it. It's not on the flesh of that vegetable. It's only on the skin of it. So if you take that skin off, then you reduce the risk of having those C. botulinum spores. Another thing I will reiterate is whenever you're cooking your canned goods after you either pressure can them or hot water bath them or steam can them, it does not matter the method. Always cook your food for at least 10 minutes and bring those vegetables to a rolling boil, or pan fry them or pan saute them up to 185 degrees Fahrenheit to eliminate that botulism toxin that could possibly be present, because again, you cannot smell botulism, you cannot see botulism. It's an invisible toxin, and that will prevent that from happening. Next, we will discuss high acid food examples: pickled peppers, pickles, jam, jelly, tomatoes, pineapples, and apples. Most fruits, pickles, and jams and jellies are examples of foods that are high in acidity. Compared to low acid foods, these foods require far less heating because there is no concern about the formation of C. botulinum. You can give it a hot water bath when you have these foods. Um, you really just need to meet the pasteurization temperature standards to make them safe. Despite the fact that peppers and cucumbers and other vegetables might have a low acidity level, because people even pickle green beans as well. The green bean itself is low acidity, but the pickling process of adding the vinegar or adding lemon juice or whatever you're going to add to it to make it more acidic is what helps. Tomatoes are acidic all on their own. Lemon juice and at least 5% grade of vinegar can be added to make those more acidic. If the grade of the vinegar is less than 5%, it is not acidic enough to be used to have it as an acidifier. As far as seasonings go, there are some canning seasonings do's and don'ts. Canning salt is a must because it doesn't have that iodine in it. It is not advised to use table salt for canning, since the calcium silicate may induce clouding in your jars while they're being stored, and it can also lead to spoilage. Certain foods can get discolored by the iodine, and it also affects the nutritional value. Basil is a good herb that you can use. You can use peppercorns. Some people use a little bit of ground pepper, oregano. You can also use onion powder and garlic powder. Um, One thing I would never use is sage. It's not that it'll make it spoil, but sage can result in an unpleasant or bitter taste over time with your canned goods. Um, Herbs and seasoning can also become stronger from that canning method, especially with pressure canning. I remember I pressure canned some collard greens and I just added just a little bit of canning salt. Once I did go back and taste them, the canning salt was not the issue. I'm not sure what it did to the greens, but the greens had more of a vinegary taste, and I hadn't added any vinegar. It was just water, the collard greens, and a little bit of canning salt. So sometimes that pressure can bring something out of that vegetable, and it really brings the worst out of sage. I'm just gonna be honest. Um, so always remember, even when you're cooking, less is more in those situations. Always add less, and then you can always go back and add more once you're cooking them. Personally, some people add citric acid to their pickles and things of that nature when they make them. I don't add any of that. They say it keeps the crisp. I don't add anything but just a little bit of canning salt and some water. I may add some broth, but even with my broth is not seasoned. I always go back and season my food after the fact because, again, I'm not eating it straight out of the jar. I'm always prepping when I'm canning for meals. Next, I want to go over a couple little tips and tricks to remember. You can can your food using pressure canning, but you always allow it to come down to zero pressure and that pin to come down before you remove those food from that pressure canner. If you're using an electric canner, also wait for it to come down to pressure before removing it. Sometimes I'll wait an entire hour with a pressure cannon to allow it to get back down to pressure. Steam canning, give it 10 minutes after processing and remove those jars. Hot water bathing, give it 10 minutes and then remove those jars. You let those jars rest on a level surface away from each other. Some people say about 2 inches apart, but just make sure that they're not touching. It is not advised that you leave your jars in the canner overnight or wrap them in a towel overnight due to possibility of flat sour. So I know sometimes when I do my canning, when they come out, I'll put a towel over them for about maybe like 5-10 minutes at most. Sometimes I do not because I notice with pressure canning, you can experience a little bit of siphoning if that heat is not decompressing off those jars properly. Flat sour is a condition um, that occurs when canned food loses its flavor or acquire an unpleasant taste or odor. Canned foods such as fruits and vegetables and acidic foods like tomato sauces are especially linked to this problem. Doesn't really happen with meat at all. The term flat sour perfectly describes this flavor because it's really sour, it's bitter, and it smells very off-putting. When the canning procedure is not done properly, flat sour can happen. Flat sour can develop as a result of incomplete heating or cooling procedures that permit heat resistant microorganisms to thrive. So, again, I am guilty of covering up my jars for maybe like 5 or 10 minutes, but I never leave them wrapped up overnight. But again, some people do, and if that has worked for them, that's fine. But I just wanted to give a little bit of information on that. After those jars have sat for 12 to 24 hours after processing, you take your rings off and you check your seals. The way you check your seal is to make sure that indent in the middle is down. I normally tap on the top of it and it sounds really dull. If it sounds like it's pinging back, that means that it's not sealed. I do have a video about testing seals on my profile as well. And you pick up that jar just by the tips of your fingers with that seal, just holding the seal, and it should hold. It should not fall. Always remember to wash your jars. You wash them with soap and water and you dry them off. Your jars need to have the name on them. Always put the name of what it is and what day you made it. I have made some chicken broth, and sometimes chicken broth, when it's really rich in that collagen and is that chicken bone broth, it can look like vegetable broth. So please put the names on them so that you'll know what they are. You can always store them in a cool location. I remember older houses will have a root cellar. Houses made now do not have root cellars, so you can actually store those in your pantry closet. Just make sure it's a darker, cool space. You don't want the sunlight getting to your jars. If your jars are not sealed, you can keep those and use it within a refrigerator. I put it in a refrigerator and use it within a week. But there is also a way, and I've done this. If your jars don't seal, I normally change my jar but you have to do this within 24 hours. I change my jar and I put a new seal on there and a new ring and I reprocess it for the same amount of time. that I processed it the first time. Sometimes jars don't seal because of user error. Either you didn't put it fingertip tight and maybe the lid popped off or it bent up, or there could have been a crack around the surface of your jar. So always check your jars for any fine cracks. Um, and that is pretty much for that part. The last part I want to give you guys is a counting altitude pressure guide. It gives you the altitude for 1,001 feet to 3,000 feet for hot water bathing, basically saying that you should increase your processing time 5 minutes. So this chart is very helpful. If you have a dial gauge like I have on my Presto 23 quart pressure canner, 0 to 1,000 feet is 11 pounds of pressure. So I'll always pressure can at 11 pounds of pressure. But if I had a weighted gauge on my canner, I would do 10 pounds of pressure because we're 0 to 1,000 feet here in Ohio. I do want to say, I know these videos can be a little lengthy to watch on TikTok, but this actually should be a full class. Thank you so much to everybody who's taking time to listen to them. I'm trying to pack and consolidate as much information as I can in these videos on TikTok so that you can get a good idea. But the main thing to do is take what I'm giving you and also go and do your own research. You may research and say, hey, I want to hot water bath my meat. I want to hot water bath my vegetables. Or I want to pressure can, as much as I can. But it's all up to you, and it's all up to what you feel comfortable with. I would say please do a little more research on botulism if that is one of your concerns. I do look at what the government site says, but I also are going with tested methods for myself. Personally, I would never believe anybody else over what I've done for my own research. So I'm here to help as much as I can. Let me know if you have any questions. For class 4, I'm going to do our first hot water bath sample, and we may even have a practical with it so you can show me what you've done. And this has been great. Thank you so much for the opportunity to work with everybody, and have a great week.